hey, you better watch our show, which is a very reasonable thing to say to a group of people consisting solely of people who are already watching our show. And if you're not watching our show, then you better, because you should in reasons. It makes sense, trust me. That's all.
But what's the catch? And welcome to this month's episode of the 800s. I am your co-host Alex, and you just heard from my lovely co-host Adam. And as always, thank you to the man behind the screen making it happen, Alan. Literally couldn't do this without you. So with that, let's quick get through our plugs and sponsors and get right into this chat.
Sure thing. We are the DM's Table. If you have not heard of us, head over to dmstable.com to find out all about us. Other than that, all I want to say right now is that cool piece of music you heard before the show started was Fearless First by Incompetech. There's a couple of links below the video. You should check those out. But to avoid boring you further, why don't we jump right into the nitty-gritty of what we are.
All right. So this month on the 800s, we'll be discussing the somewhat controversial classic novel Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. World War II is in full swing, and all Captain Yossarian wants is to go home, but he can't because he has to fly more missions. So he goes to the doctor, claiming he's too crazy to fly, but the doctor says only a person of sound mind would act to save themselves from danger. Therefore, Yossarian isn't crazy, even though being crazy is the only way not to have to fly more missions. And that's the catch. And what catch? Catch-22.
Yes, very good, very good. The catch, also known as Catch-22. If this is your first time joining us for our show, I'll give you a quick rundown of what exactly we do here. We are a discussion show. We discuss a book, this book being Catch-22. How that works is Alex and myself will pose a topic or question to discuss. And while you, chat, have a moment to type up your response, Alex and I will share our response to the topic or question. And at the end of sharing our opinions, we'll take a look at chat and shout out to anybody who has strong opinions on the topic at hand. At any point, if you have something you would like to discuss about the book, feel free to throw it up in chat. Alex and myself will keep an eye on chat for such topics and throw them up for discussion when there's a lull. That's pretty much it. But the best way that this show works is with audience participation.
Yep, and as usual, quick little disclaimer, this is a show for adults. We do discuss adult topics, themes, especially in this book. While we try not to swear too much, it does happen, and again, might happen a lot in this book in particular, so bring minors around at your own discretion. And a quick little trigger warning, this book has just about all of them, so if you're not prepared for that and haven't read the book, this might be one to pause on. Also, we try to create a fun and welcoming environment over at DM's Table. Make it a place where people feel comfortable sharing all of their passions and things that they love to nerd out about without any fear of judgment or any sort of persecution. So in some, be nice or fuck off, private.
Good twist there for the military book. Without further ado, why don't we jump right into the discussion with our traditional topic? What were your first thoughts of Catch-22?
My first thoughts are, man, is this book hard to get into off the bat. It kind of comes out swinging in a way that can be a little discombobulating. I think that seems to be, like, as you read, that clearly is just, it's setting a tone right from the beginning, but I think it kind of, to me, presented a fairly high barrier of entry for reading this book. In that regard, is it's just stuff happening there. It's hard to follow, and it seems really random, but as you keep reading, you start to pick up little bits where, oh, this was done very purposefully. But initially I was just like, whoa, like I'm having trouble kind of getting into this because it just feels like a random anthology.
Yeah.
What about you, Adam?
It feels, the beginning of the book feels very, this isn't real or logical. And if you don't take it as satire from page one, then it's like, this doesn't make any sense. What do you mean this guy always runs a fever of 100 and something? You know,
101
it's not
exactly.
Good. Yeah. Guy's in trouble. What do you mean this general is this much of a dumbass? How the fuck did this happen?
Well, yeah, every character is a caricature right from the beginning.
Yeah, but if you take that satire from page one, I think it's a pretty hilarious scenario to consider. Excuse my yawning.
You're the one who
Not
just
to
had
say
a
that
nap.
This book bored me.
Yeah, it seems like V.S. Drake had a similar experience to you. They said that they actually had to look up the fact that this had a comedy style to it because it was so wacky right from the beginning. So yeah. I don't blame you there, V.S. Drake. It's very National Lampoon Chevy Chase out. I would say yes, but like in parts of it just cranked up to like 11, which is saying a lot if your baseline is Chevy Chase, you know.
I'd say if you go into this book expecting it to be like a serious World War II, you know, like tragedy of sorts, then I think you're going to be highly disappointed. Yeah. But I will say that the what's the word? The prose, sorry, forgot the word for a second. The prose is very well formed and consistent and holds its own throughout.
Yeah, why don't we make that our first topic, and we'll go in a little more in depth into the prose.
Yeah.
So you said that you find it to be consistent and well formed. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, the author has a specific tone that I think he's trying to get across with this book, and that's that war is chaos, and to treat it any other way is simply chaos, and therefore everything should be chaos. And
yeah, right from the first letter.
Yeah, and everything that is mentioned in this book is exaggerated to an extreme, and it's almost to the point where you can assume that the narrator of the story is somebody who's exaggerating the truth of the real story, and if you take it as like a habitual liar is telling you a story and this is what they told you, you know, it's very true to how you would expect the story to go.
Well,
what do you think of the prose?
Honestly, like, it is consistent. It does set a tone, and I agree with all of what you said. There were some times that I found it really annoying, like especially when it was. There were parts of it that were repetitive on purpose, and parts of it that just felt repetitive to be annoying. And some of that I get is just like the characters are meant to be annoying, like that's the whole point. But Man, there were some times I had to just kind of pause and step away because I was just like, I can't slap a fictional character and tell them to shut up. I mean, not that I'd slap anybody in real life either. Don't condone violence in that regard, especially. But it was, sometimes just there was I can't remember which character did it, but there was a character that rubbed his temples like this, like did one of these numbers, and I found myself doing that a number of times, which I guess speaks to the strength of the prose if that was intentional.
Yeah. I'd say the strongest example is Doc Danica when he dies in the airplane crash, and everybody's all like, "Oh, poor Doc Danica," and he's all like, "I'm fucking alive," and they're like, "Yes, it's almost like he's here with us still."
Oh yeah, it's just my Python and the Holy Grail is like, I'm not dead yet.
Very much gives you that vibe of like nobody really liked him and wanted to just ignore him, so they totally ignored him into death itself.
Funny, and his wife moved to Lansing, Michigan.
That is what fucking. Oh my god! I totally get what's that. Wait, how much money do I get? Never mind, I don't care.
This is also a book that I think and this is kind of like, I think this has to do with the prose specifically. It's funnier to discuss than it is to read. There are funny parts, but when you can remove yourself from the more agitating parts of the prose, it just becomes pure comedy. Which, like,
that is well said. Yes, exactly that.
Oh yes, with no forwarding address, by the way, for Dr. Nika. G.S. Drake also mentions about the prose is they loved how fast it got them into their mind theater. I can see how that would be the case because there are certain proses that lend themselves to creating a world through the descriptions of the setting, and there's certain types of prose that bring you into a space because of the character of the characters. And I feel like this, at least for me, was the latter.
Yeah, I think this book stood on telling character experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It almost felt like a series of short stories, I'd say. And
yeah.
And as a short story, yeah, it was highly entertaining.
Yeah, it really doesn't come together as a cohesive novel until towards the end, and part of that has to do with story structure, which is another topic in and of itself. Which would you like to move on to that one, or did you have something specific in mind you wanted to discuss, Adam?
No, we can move on to that.
All right. So story structure.
Yeah, I think I pros and cons. Sorry, I just saw what you put up there for the pros thing.
Thanks. I was pretty proud of that one.
Story structure here is very much character centric, not plot centric. I think because although it's a series of, it's a World War II story, but it doesn't stand without discussing the characters and what they do in different experiences. I almost always like to consider Catch-22 as a collection of short World War II stories with um, a cohesive theme of madness. And I think it works for Catch-22, but I also think it makes it kind of hard to cram through the book and finish it in a timely manner.
Yeah, I agree. And part of it has to do with the specific, like, it's in a chronological order, right? We get bits and pieces that at the beginning reference things that come later, but to the character were before, and it wraps around and re-looks at things from different perspectives. And it's a lot to try to keep track of, but it allows the stories to kind of act independently. It just, like you said, it's a little confusing up front. And what I did like about it, though, is despite it being confusing up front, everything that was put out there was used. There was nothing that felt unresolved that wasn't very explicitly stated to be unresolved. You know, let's use Orr, for example. We know he wound up in Switzerland. We know, sorry, not Switzerland. He wound up in Sweden. He got there, and like I thought for sure he just like died in the ocean, but nope, they came back around, and we know he got there, and we know that's what inspires Yossarian at the end to leave and try to get there because at least he's doing something. But it's kind of like a one-off of like, or made it to Sweden, and then Yossarian gets a chance to be like, no, that crafty bastard did it on purpose, and like it's a great payoff joke of something like all those little things, because Orr was absolutely one of those characters that I found really annoying, especially with his stupid like, you want to know why, and then giving non-answers to everything. Like annoying as hell. But man, if it didn't pay off at the end, like and that kind of story structure, I think, is part of why this is considered like a classic by a lot of people, despite some of the more controversial aspects of the sexism and misogyny and racism and all that. Not to mention the language and sexual themes, but
yeah,
like it is kind of this like weird amalgamation of short stories that come together, and they build more to punchlines than to a like true climax. You kind of get that with Yossarian deciding to leave, but it happens like so towards the end. It doesn't play out like a true, like hero's journey that we typically see in like high fantasy and sci-fi. But that's kind of what makes this book stand out.
Yeah. V.S. Drake quoted Yossarian. I know that name. I know like 3 Yossarians. It's Cabal, I swear. I think that's a really good quote to kind of land like the short story-esque feature of Catch-22, where it's like, oh, everybody heard different stories about different characters, and it's hard to pinpoint them as being the same person, and without the cohesive nature of having it written down for you in a convenient book with all the characters conveniently named for your convenience. What did you think about the leadership in the story and how they reacted to the various big events in the book, and how they tried to deal with the madness of war, specifically like the colonels and the generals and
I was gonna say, what rank are we talking? Where do you get to leadership? Because Yossarian's a captain. Technically, that's an officer, but he gets treated essentially like any one of the servicemen, with some slight exception. But it's a good thing that this is meant to be satirical because the sheer amount of I the sheer lack of intelligence of people that had wound up in these leadership positions was astonishing. And it makes me kind of wonder, because these are obviously caricatures, but it makes me wonder back then, what was the leadership really like? Because we only see, we are the civilians, we're the press side, we're the ones that see all those pictures of, was it, who was the one who's obsessed with being in the Saturday Post or whatever.
Oh yeah, one of the colonels.
Yeah, one of the colonels is I can't remember if it was Korn or I had a list of all the characters here because there's 90 of them to keep track of, which is nuts. I think maybe Colonel Cathcart was the other one. Either way, we as civilians only ever see what's presented to us, not the behind the scenes stuff. So it makes me wonder, we see the ambitious one in there's there's the colonel who's trying to who's a part of the more the special services, and he's super ambitious and only likes other ambitious and only likes people who are subservient to him, and that kind of that's the kind of guy that I might expect would climb. But then you have the exact opposite in lieutenant, then colonel, then General Sheiskov, who just falls backwards into everything. And they're literally major got it because it was his name. and I think it was just the sheer absurdity of these people made the absurdity of their actions make sense in a way that would make sense to them. But if that were the case in real life, how dumb did the other side have to be to lose? I mean, obviously, you're not putting, your General Patton's in southern Italy, which is barely, which has already had the fascists overthrown and is barely occupied by Germany, towards the end of the war. But at the same time, still a general, still a colonel, and you got there because you're obsessed with parades.
It's gonna make us march parades.
I think the idea, though, was that what really rises to the top are people that are fairly singularly minded, whether that is to their own ambitions, to even if it's singularly minded to complete hermitdom, like major. Those are the people that get to the top, and it ultimately isn't them who suffer most of the time. It's the people below them. And that's just I thought that felt like a fairly satirical but somewhat accurate critique of the military industrial complex, in particular military hierarchy. Bureaucracy is its own thing, but the fact that so many of them take everything that's told to them at face value until they don't like what it says to them, that it just, I think that was the thing I found the most driving as far as their the fingers they put on the scales of the other characters in this book is just, it's all the way it's supposed to be until I don't like it. And yeah. So how about you?
Yeah, the leadership of the book gave very much a fake it till you make it vibe, but they kept getting promoted, so they couldn't stop ever faking it kind of thing. I really liked the major moment when he was like, "Don't let anybody in to see me until I'm gone, and then you can let them in to see me. But
Mhm.
as soon as I get back, you have to make sure they're out, and then they can come and see me when I leave again."
Mhm.
And the dude is just like, "I'm not even going to lie about it. I'm going to tell them straight to their face, you can't go in there to see him until he's gone, and then you can go in there to see him." And like, there's no consequences. He just gets away with it.
Yeah, the only one who ever like circumvents this is Yossarian, and it's because he went around back and caught him sneaking out the window. And
Literally circumvented it.
literally, yes, exactly. And yeah, so great point.
But yeah, I like V.S. Drake's example about the letters for the
Mhm.
families of fallen soldiers. That's another wonderful example of something that could have been totally true and hyper exaggerated by the narrator. Like maybe they felt like, in a real life scenario, they were like, "Oh man, I just noticed that all of the letters that we send home are incredibly scripted, and we just change like the pronouns that we use in the letters." And if somebody ever showed their letter to somebody else who has a similar letter, they're going to realize that there's totally no truth behind them at all, and stuff, you know
Mhm.
taken to the max.
Well, yeah,
Don't
that
take
was
the
it.
other pronouns out.
Yeah, I mean, it was the formiest of form letters, right? It's like
Is
taking all
the
the
Mad Libs
humanity
of
out of it
letters.
and then just stamping a signature on it, which, again, to your example of Dr. Danika's death, that was, and that was another like payoff joke of those letters being what ultimately convinces her that he's dead and she should move on. uh, so yeah, I think it's also, I think I like that part about like the lack of consequences to these people for this stuff that happens to them, you know, and it only ever comes down on the people who seem to actually care about what it does. Like Washington Irving is a good example. The chaplain just wanted to do his job. He wanted to do good, and he wanted to just be a good chaplain and contribute. And he gets blamed for Irving Washington. Uh, and when they find out that and when they find out that it's not him, they're like, it very much becomes a, well, we can't be wrong, so we need to find you guilty.
Yeah.
And the chain of command makes it almost impossible to do anything about that when the higher ups are the issue. And
Yeah, I liked the hearing to find out what you're guilty of hearing.
yeah. Speaking of which, since we've had them, what was your favorite paradox
Favorite
or
paradox.
catch 22?
Hmm. I don't want to pick something super obvious like the insanity one.
Hey, I mean,
Um,
sometimes it's the hits, right? Well,
no.
VS Drake said the insanity one is their favorite, so like it, like there's a reason why it works.
That's legitimate
Uh,
reason.
I mean, while you're
I
thinking,
liked
go ahead.
I liked I liked the upping the missions one. So he had to always up the missions to stand out. Um, the colonel who kept upping the missions.
Yeah, Cathcart
Uh,
was the one.
yeah, and he couldn't not up the missions because if at any point he stopped upping the missions, his entire team would go home, and he couldn't just have an entire team of new recruits. So he was forced to continue upping the missions so as to not let every single person go.
Yeah, and then like also by doing that, he also made it impossible to replace anybody that was there by the time it was pretty imperative that they replace the people there, or there might be a straight up mutiny. So, that was the one I was really hoping would have like true consequences to it. But again, they swoop in and they're like, "You, Yosarian, you become friends with us and make it seem like we know what we're doing, and we'll set you up for life." And yeah, so yeah, that's a really good one. My one of my favorites that it didn't go on for super long, but it was one of the few that I like actually laughed out loud at was when Yossarian is with Luciana in Rome, and she's like, "You can't possibly want to be with me because I'm a virgin, because I'm not a virgin," and he's like, "Well, that doesn't matter. Then you're crazy, and you still can't be with me." It's like, and it was just this back and forth between them, where I think is one of the first ones that we see that isn't in a strictly military setting, or it's one of the first ones that I noticed in particular. And I liked how it didn't go. I like that one was a little more self-contained and that it was allowed to just kind of be a joke in and of itself. So didn't have to take it as seriously as the other ones. I think it's a little more, it's a little lighter despite the, what ends up happening in the end.
Yeah.
Another one that Via Straight Club was Nate Lee's Horror, and
I gotta ask because I don't think I understood this at all. But like, why the fuck did Nate Lee's Horror want to kill Yosarian so bad?
I don't know that it was her every time. I really don't know that it was her every time. Like, I get the initial outlashing of potentially, you're the one who killed the messenger, right? You gave me the bad news, so you're the one that I'm going to unleash all my crazy on. Yeah. But I don't think that especially after they returned her on the plane, but potentially even that time, the first time that they returned her on the plane, I don't think that was her every time. I think she just became some kind of PTSD overlay that Yossarian put on every potential threat he encountered. We see a bit of this at the very end when they say where the colonels say it was a German it was a German assassin, and you stopped them from killing us. That means you're a hero. And it's meant to be ambiguous because we don't know if it's the lying and ass covering of the colonels or if it's Yossarian being crazy. Or not crazy, but like, he's going through some extreme mental trauma. So I don't know which one it is, and I think that's kind of the point is like it comes back to that idea of you have to be crazy in order to get out of flying combat missions, but he is so crazy that he sees a distraught Italian woman trying to trying to kill him instead of seeing danger, so he doesn't know to go to somebody and say he's crazy.
I get it. I get it. I get it. Okay. It's not they send you home if you're crazy and you don't no longer have to fly combat missions. It's if you're crazy, you probably won't fly the combat missions anymore because you're too busy being crazy.
I mean, like that's what their thought process is, but ultimately it comes down to like, well, we can only send you home if you're crazy, but you can't be crazy if you can tell us that you're crazy. and and the book kind of proves it is we don't know if he's crazy or not, so we don't know if he can actually go home or not based on those specific parameters. So he's just like, screw it, I'm out. Which is the only
I'm
way
saying
to do
that's the rationale. The
it.
lie
Yeah.
is if you're crazy, we'll send you home. The truth
Oh,
is
yeah.
we're not sending you home no matter what. But if you're crazy enough, you might just find your own way out by being too crazy to actually physically do it.
Well, I mean, we kind of see some variation of that with Milo Minderbinder. He
Yeah.
is like money crazy, and it gets to the point that he manipulates and crazies his way out of any combat missions simply because he made himself indisposable. Uh, why don't we go with what VS Drake suggested? Let's go with favorite non-Yosarian characters and why.
I think my favorite not Yosarian character was probably Nately because he was so convinced that he loved that one random whore that he hooked up with, and they were totally incompatible for each other. Even when she came around to the idea, it was like, this isn't going to work. Otherwise.
Well, but he was gonna make it work, and damned it. And when it finally falls into place, of course, he has to stick around because he has to stay with his love, and that ends up being why he dies, which, is the catch-22 in this.
Yeah.
Is to stick around, you have to put your life in danger, which may inevitably shorten the time that you get with the person that you want to spend your life with. VS Drake said that they love Milo Minderbinder in his crazy scheme that was so stupid that it became good. What I agree, he was one of my favorites. I'll talk about mine specifically, but Minderbinder, what I liked about him is that none of what he did was malicious. It was just pure greed, and it shows how messed up pure greed gets, because it's like you end up doing stuff endlessly to come out with nothing of any actual value except to buy more stuff. It's the complex of the military industrial complex. And he created a job that was so unessential he became essential, which was ridiculous. And he bombed his own base. Which is...
I think the key behind Milo is he created spectacle to make need of his goods. The whole buy my $7 goods or 7-cent goods for 5 cents. Buy these eggs that cost 7 cents, but you only have to pay 5 cents. It totally makes sense. Trust me, when in reality, it was actually a 2-cent egg that he's selling for 5 cents.
Yeah.
But because spectacle, there's need for it.
Well, he created middlemen inside of middlemen, and all to buy stuff that doesn't actually have any good. Although it does make me wonder if he was like inspired by. There's a story, I don't know how true it is, that during World War II, just because they could, American logistics delivered a birthday cake to the enemy like they just placed it outside of like this German commander's outpost, just delivered him a cake just to be like, hey, we can do this for shits and giggles. You guys are screwed. Because
do whatever we want.
Truly, American logistics in those wars were like a big reason why America was able to accomplish as much as it did. But, you know, at the same time, obvious drawbacks being Milo and everything that comes with him. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Milo represents the illusion of competition that exists even in today's world, where companies own a bunch of other companies, and it looks like there's a bunch of companies competing in the same area, but in reality it's like this one major company that owns all these sub companies that operate in the same field, and then maybe a couple of others, but really it's like 80% just one company. And
oh, absolutely,
like what Disney does with Hulu and all of its other sub companies that are seemingly competition, but in reality, Disney.
Yeah. Well, Andy also covers the kind of social and political clout that comes with that. What he's the Marquis of Rome, the whatever number other list of titles that he had, you know, into like what basically everywhere that he set up some kind of middleman thing. It was, you know, he had some kind of like political position there, and just kind of seemingly fell into it. It's a little hard to tell because he was in the middle of it when we find out about it all.
Yeah. Who is your favorite?
So I think my favorite probably was I forget the old man's name in the who stayed in the house with all the women in Rome, who's basically like, in war there is no right and wrong, there's only survival. Like, you guys it's like, as soon as we started losing, we started winning. Like, I think I just liked him as a character because he was just like, he is what he is, and I like that he spoke to the absurdity of war as like a general concept of the only people who ever really lose wars are the people who are actively in them. And like,
he had the great quote about nations not lasting forever and stuff.
Yeah, no nations last forever. I like that he he got pretty metaphysical with it too. Is like, although I think his timing for the sun destroying us might be a little off. Pretty sure it's close. I think he might be off by a decimal point or so. But
yeah, Rise Against quoted that guy in one of their songs. They had a really good song.
Yeah, but I don't know why he was my favorite character, and I'm blanking on his name, and it's bothering the absolute living snot out of me. You know, I also, even in his death, there was that note about how he was the first to, like, he was the first to follow the majority. So when the majority died, he died too. And I think it was, oh man, we'll get this at some point, but yeah, he was my favorite little like side character. You guys touched on my other two favorite characters, so I was trying to not go over them as well. But yeah, Nately, for all of his many faults, was an interesting character, and absolutely so was Milo Minderbinder.
Yeah, I don't remember him having a name. He might have just been that old guy.
I thought they said it at one point, just like in passing, but it could have been just, like Nate Lee's girl was like that, just a title.
Say it. No, you don't have to say
Well,
it. I'm just kidding.
They said both. I was trying to use the other one that we hadn't said
No,
yet.
no, I mean you. What didn't work in this book? What didn't you like?
I think the biggest thing I didn't like is that sometimes just I get that he was trying to make a point with how ridiculously convoluted and yet simple illogical logic was going on, but some of that stuff didn't need to go on for as long as it did or as many times as it did, in my opinion. Like the same arguments happening across like 10 different chapters, and it wasn't just mentioned once. It would be like the same argument, but it would go on for several pages or whatever, multiple times, and that got to be a bit cloying to me in a way that I didn't really like. And again, going back to that slight barrier of entry into this book of it being super convoluted at the beginning without much to really grasp onto, I think I think it presents a fairly high barrier of entry to this book. It doesn't help the fact that you do have to be a pretty serious reader to actually get into this book, because how many SAT words are in this book is ridiculous. So in that way, slight issues. Also, some things, it was hard to tell where the line was between joke and satire and what might have been actual views of the author. And the parts where it gets ambiguous in particular are usually more in relation to how women are treated and what the expectation is of them. And that part was a little tough to deal with for me personally, but it's, it doesn't like ruin the book. It's just, little things. What stood out to you?
I really liked the humor this story had, and it speaks to me on a core level. But it's hard to listen to the humor 24/7 throughout the
Yeah.
entire book. It makes it hard to, sit down and make real progress on this book. I think this is a good book to take your time with, and take a chunk here, chunk there. Other than that, though, the disjointed timeline made it kind of hard to keep track of what was going on, and what time period we're in for each story. Like, did this happen yet? Did that happen yet? Was this before that? Was this after that? There's a lot of jumping around, made it a little confusing. Kind of hits home on this is a collection of short stories, but for me that made it harder to perceive it as a single continuous story.
Which we know is
those two things, really.
Which we know is your bread and butter.
Yeah. V.S. Drake says the deja vu parts were thematic, but wasn't pumped about them because it muddied the waters for me on where I was in the timeline. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a great example.
I think Heller had a real habit of sidetracking into another story. Like, oh hey, since I'm mentioning these things, let me mention this other story, and it kind of pulls you out of the main story, and it's kind of hard to keep track of what was going on.
Yeah, definitely a little all over the place in that regard, and some of it's hard to know when you're reading these things how much of that is intentional, particularly when you have an author who's talking about characters that are all having issues with making connections to what's going on in their own lives and dealing with what is very clearly, the fallout of all the trauma of the war going on. So it's hard to tell what's intentional and what is just kind of poor writing. Not having seen any combat myself, can't really speak to that all that directly, but
I think thematically it works because you take it as like your mind is a little muddled because of all the around you. Yeah, the story gets a little muddled, but doesn't mean it works as a novel though.
And there is a sequel to this one, which I only found out after reading this, because I read this way back in high school.
Obvious strength is a sequel.
Yes, there is a sequel. It was written like over a decade later too, which is crazy. Like it was written in like the 90s or something like that. I guess we gotta V.S. Drake, probably to find out whether or not Yossarian makes it out. I don't know.
Heller was mid-thought when he ended this book, and he wanted to finish his thought.
Apparently, yeah, he wanted to finish his thought. I don't know how many years later.
All right, final thoughts. What were your final thoughts on the book?
Oh, just a really, really quick aside. 33 years later, he wrote Catch-22 in 1961, and the follow-up closing time was written in 1994. Apparently, he had thoughts.
Yo goes to Vietnam. Oh God, can you imagine?
Well, who was the one? Hungry Joe. He was the one who probably wanted to go to Vietnam. So guy. Final thoughts on this book. It's tough to get into initially, but I think it is worth reading for readers that have like a pretty high comprehension level, because there's a lot to keep track of, and who, not just in plot, but characters and other things. But also I think this takes a lot of like not just literal literacy, but like media literacy, in that there are some very touchy subjects that get brought up in this in some pretty cavalier ways, and if you don't understand its satire, it could be taken in some pretty awful ways, or reinforce or put some pretty crappy values into some people's heads if they don't understand that. But with I think some decent media literacy and vocabulary, you're probably fine to enjoy this. But I think you had it absolutely nail on the head, Adam. Take your time with it. Don't try and like force your way through this book unless you're just really loving it, because pilots get burnt out and so do readers. How about you, Adam? What are your final thoughts?
This was the most hilarious book that I hated with a passion. I thought it was hilarious 20 years ago when I first read it, and I thought it was hilarious now. I hated it back then. I hated it now. I'll probably read it again in another 20 years.
Honestly, I get that. I really do. Like, I won't necessarily recommend it to anyone, but Godspeed to those that do.
Nah, fuck you. Everybody should read this book. Every single person on this planet should suffer through this book.
And Godspeed to the lot of you. V.S. Drake thinks it's a solid book, and they see why it's a classic. It's funny about serious subjects. It manages to find a way to bring up serious scenes in conversation on PTSD. I do think it does bring that up, as well as issues with war and military-industrial complex, and even ideas of sexism / misogyny, and some some of the racial issues as well could have been handled better, absolutely, but it does. It does. Sorry, I was laughing at Via Strike.
Yeah.
I never read this book and suggested to everyone. Fuck everyone. Fight me. Yeah, that
Same
about
page,
sums it
Via
up.
Straight.
Yeah, that about sums it up. So with that, why don't we why don't we wrap up?
Yeah. So our next book is April. Is April 26th the right date? I thought it was sooner than
Yes.
that.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it's April 26th, and then we have a very quick turnaround for our next book. So just
For
a
some
heads
reason
up.
I was thinking it was sooner than that, but April 26th, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yaros. And then May 3rd, Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. Star Wars Legends book.
Yeah, those are a part of our Spring is Sprung and our May the 4th be with you sci-fi month. Speaking of which, we are going back to original recipe. All things, 800s in your library back for June to start our summer off. Through summer, we'll definitely be going back to our summer reads. It may or may not be a random romance novel again. So we'll find out about our beach reads, and we'll let you know about further themes from there. Dates are to be determined as of yet.
Did you get any side pieces in?
I did. In fact, get in some side pieces. I read the follow-up to our last book. And admittedly, it does work better as a series than it does as an individual. It's called The World We Build, and it is, I think it brings together a lot of those themes that felt a little unanswered in the last one, so I was glad for that. And I also read, what was it? I have to. Do you have any side pieces? Because I've got to look it up. There's one that I.
No, I did not. I had no side pieces. I spent the entire time on Catch-22. Back to you, Alex.
So
VS
I
Drake
mean,
didn't read any.
I didn't get through it all the way.
Hogwarts Legacy. That's good. That's good.
So I didn't get through it all the way, but I started in on I got like maybe a quarter into it. I'm probably gonna have to restart, but I got into The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So I started it on Spotify, and I did not realize it had such a low number of hours you get per month.
Yeah.
Which I had
like 15 or something like that.
It's only 10. It's not enough to get through most books, which is why I listened to a very short book on it, thought it was fine, came back to start in another one, got like an hour into it, and done. But it seemed interesting, at least to start, but like I said, I was barely getting into it.
Cool.
All right.
Plugs. Let's talk plugs. Plug dump. YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. You guys should totally check it out. It's we're the DM Stable on YouTube. There's a link below your video, unless you're on YouTube right now watching us. In which case, you don't need us to tell you about our YouTube channel because you already know about it because you're there. Catch-22, anybody? Anyway, If you enjoy audiobooks, might I suggest Audible, Amazon's audiobook platform. You can get a free 1-month subscription with a couple of free titles if you go to dmstable.com/audible. Sign up today and give Amazon more money. If you want to know more about us, hit up dmstable.com, where you can find all of these links as well as information about who we are and what we do. I've already pumped it, but Incompetech has awesome scores for all of your audio needs. You should check them out if you're looking to throw some music into your projects or just want to vibe with some cool tunes. Incompetech, it's a place to be. We have Patreon. For free, you can come on our Patreon and vote for what book we read next. And if you really love us, you can sign up for one of the paid tiers and give us a couple of bucks each month. We are the DM's Table on Patreon. Yes, it helps us keep the lights on. The other way we pay for these lights is with Etsy. dmstable.com/Etsy is the official link, and that'll get you to the store page where you can find nerd stuff like nerdy images and nerdy 3D prints. You should check it out. We do have a couple of socials. We're not super active there, but if you wanted to remind yourself who we are, on Facebook and X, we are the DM's Table and DM's Table, respectively. And of course, we have a Discord server where we chat about all things nerdy, not just books. If you're interested, feel free to hit us up on one of our socials, and we'll try and get you the link to our Discord server. Plug-wise, I think that's about it, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This was an interesting book and an interesting chat. We look forward to seeing you next book.
Yes, thank you guys for joining us. This was a fun conversation about a fun-hating book, and really excited to do it again in a few weeks. See you guys next book.
See you next book.